A C-47T Phantasma. Born from a World War II airframe, Columbia rebuilt this vintage cargo plane for heavy counterinsurgency. 2 PT-6A turboprops. Zero stealth. It orbits targets in the dead of night. 3G AU-19 Gatling guns punch through jungle canopy with 50 caliber rounds. Night vision turns a 70-year-old hauler into a gunship. The original airframe design first flew in 1935. It literally outlived the engineers who built it. Decades of hard service took their toll. These airframes were never designed to spend the 21st century orbiting combat zones with Gatling guns in the windows. You can't outrun modern missiles in a retrofitted transport. Down on the mud, Soviet engineers thought extreme speed could substitute for thick steel, which led to our next machine. BTR-60. Rolled out in 1959. 10 tons of welded steel spread across 8 driven wheels. It gave mechanized infantry rapid mobility across rivers and trenches. It carried a maximum of 14 soldiers in early variants. Fast, fully amphibious, built light to float, that specific decision cost heavily. Its twin gasoline engines and thin armor made fires a serious threat, while the awkward side exit layout made escape under fire dangerous. Now look, troops quickly learned to ride on the roof rather than risk the interior. That fatal layout forced a shift in doctrine, demanding a lighter scout that didn't trap a full squad. BRDM-2. Entered service in 1962. 7 tons of Soviet scouting power. A 140 horsepower engine. It features a hidden mechanical trick. 4 chain-driven belly wheels drop down to conquer wide trenches. A 14.5mm KPVT machine gun easily shreds light armor. But scouting means taking the first hit. The original BRDM-2 had no proper side doors, forcing the crew to escape through cramped roof hatches. A nightmare if the vehicle was burning or overturned. Wheeled scouts still trigger landmines and get stuck in roadblocks. Sometimes, commanders needed to bypass the dirt entirely and drop supplies from above using the oldest trick in the book. And 2 Colt. First flown in 1947, a massive single-engine biplane, 5.5 tons, 1,000 horsepower radial engine. It fundamentally defies gravity. Automatic leading-edge slats give it an absurdly low stall speed of about 30 miles per hour. Not hovering, but close enough to look impossible for an aircraft this large. North Korea still maintains a fleet of these biplanes for special forces. Their wooden propellers and canvas wings make them surprisingly hard to spot on modern early warning radars. But canvas and aluminum don't stop bullets. Its top speed is a sluggish 160 miles per hour. Against a modern radar-guided missile, it has almost no chance. You can't haul a 3-ton artillery piece through the sky on a fabric biplane. To drag heavy guns through freezing mud, the Soviets built a relentless tracked box. MTLB. Developed in the 1960s and entering widespread service around the Cold War's middle years. 12 tons of raw utility, 240 horsepower diesel V8. The MTLB was a tractor first and an armored vehicle second. Its ultra-low ground pressure lets it glide over deep snow and swamps. In recent conflicts, desperate mechanics have bolted heavy naval anti-aircraft turrets straight onto the roofs of these tractors, creating bizarre top-heavy combat vehicles. The cost of that mobility is extreme vulnerability. The hull only offers a few millimeters of steel. A heavy machine gun cuts through the side like paper, leaving the crew completely exposed. The MTLB was too fragile for direct assaults. Armies realized they needed a mobile fortress that could fire massive shells from miles away, shifting the focus to heavy self-propelled guns. M109, fielded in 1963. 27 tons of mechanized artillery, a roughly 400 horsepower diesel on early models. It mastered the shoot and scoot tactic. It hurls 95-pound shells up to 18 kilometers away. Before the enemy radar tracks the trajectory, this rig is already moving to a new position. The thing is, mobility requires sacrifice. Its aluminum armor, about 32 millimeters thick on early variants, was meant to stop small arms and shell fragments, not direct hits, mines, or modern drones. Aluminum saved weight for artillery, but engineers applied the exact same metal to infantry transports. That bold calculation created the most mass-produced battle taxi in history. M113, deployed in 1960, a 12-ton aluminium box on tracks, 275 horsepower. It redefined mechanized warfare. Fully enclosed, it carries 11 fully equipped soldiers directly to the front line through light arms fire. Over 80,000 units were built, but aluminium has a deadly secret. A shaped charge hit can punch through the aluminium hull and fill the interior with fragments, heat, and overpressure. That vulnerability made many crews deeply distrust riding inside under heavy combat. A battle taxi can't hold the line when real armor rolls in. To survive direct combat, infantry needed a heavily armored killer with a gun that could punch through anything. T-62, introduced in 1961. Around 37 tons of Soviet steel, a 580 horsepower diesel. It changed armored warfare forever. The first production tank with a 115mm smoothbore gun. It fired tungsten darts at over 1,600 meters per second. But that massive gun required an auto-ejector for spent casings. It forced the gun to elevate after every shot, dropping the fire rate to around 4 to 8 rounds a minute. And its reverse speed was a fatal 8 kilometers per hour. Heavy and slow meant getting outflanked. The Leopard 1 came from a different Western gamble. In an age of shaped charges and nuclear battlefields, mobility and fire control looked more valuable than piling on steel. Leopard 1A5. Leopard 1 entered service in 1965, but the 1A5 upgrade arrived in the 1980s. 42 tons, an 830 horsepower engine. This upgrade turned an old hull into a sniper. It can detect, range, and engage targets in pitch darkness while moving at 40 miles per hour. By shedding heavy armor, this tank gained an extreme tactical advantage, a reverse speed of over 15 miles per hour, allowing it to shoot and vanish faster than Soviet rivals. The massive trade-off was survivability. MES-18 gave the old hull a modern fire control system and thermal sight, but it did not solve the basic problem: thin Cold War armor in a drone-saturated battlefield. Tanks still rely on roads and flat fields. When armies need to drop a couple of dozen soldiers onto a jagged mountain peak, they don't send armor, they send a flying truck. Mi-8 took flight in 1961, a flying truck that can be heavily armed. 13 tons fully loaded, two 1,500 horsepower turboshafts. It carries 24 fully armed troops anywhere. It operates in extreme altitudes and freezing temperatures. With side-mounted rocket pods, it provides its own heavy fire support during insertions. But its massive size makes it an easy target. Its external side fuel tanks and large fuselage make it vulnerable to ground fire. A lucky burst can cripple the helicopter long before it reaches the landing zone. Helicopters dominate the tactical zone but lack strategic reach. To project massive firepower across entire oceans, the Soviets built a loud, relentless leviathan that still terrifies radar operators today. Tu-95 Bear entered service in 1956, a 188-ton strategic missile carrier. 4 massive NK-12 turboprop engines. It relies on brute force rather than jets. 32 propeller blades spin at supersonic speeds, pushing the bomber to over 500 miles per hour. Engineers swept the wings at exactly 35 degrees, delaying the extreme drag that usually tears standard propeller planes apart. That raw power generates a fatal acoustic footprint. Its contra-rotating propellers make the Bear one of the loudest strategic aircraft ever built. A Cold War acoustic monster even before radar sees it. Strategic bombers operate far above the mud, but ground wars are won by occupying territory. For that, you need numbers. Endless waves of cheap steel that can overwhelm any high-tech defense. T-55, adopted in 1958, the most produced tank in human history. 36 tons of cast steel, a 500 horsepower V12 diesel. It was engineered to fight in a nuclear wasteland. It features a complete overpressure system to keep out radioactive dust. Over 100,000 units flooded the globe, overwhelming enemies with pure volume. Mass production meant cutting corners on crew survival. Ammunition and fuel were packed into a brutally cramped interior, so a penetrating hit could easily turn the crew compartment into a death trap. The T-55 defined the Cold War, but its DNA came from a much older, brutal conflict. To understand where this mass production logic started, we must look at the legendary machine that broke the German war engine. T-34-85, rolled out in 1944. 32 tons of crude, brutal efficiency. A 500 horsepower V12 diesel engine. It solved a massive problem. The 85mm gun finally gave Soviet crews a real chance against Tiger I tanks at close range and from better angles, though it was still no magic answer to every German heavy tank. Early T-34s suffered badly from poor communications, but by the T-34-85 period, radios were far more common. The bigger problem remained brutal ergonomics and the lack of a proper turret basket. You can flood the battlefield with cheap tanks, but to completely destroy an enemy's industrial capacity, you need to look up. Way up. Engineers built an absolute titan that refuses to retire. B-52 Stratofortress. First flown in 1952. 220 tons of strategic destruction. 8 massive jet engines. It was built to drop nuclear gravity bombs on the Soviets. Instead, it became the ultimate missile truck. It can carry up to 35 tons of smart munitions, loiter for hours, and launch standoff cruise missiles from thousands of miles away. This airframe has been flying for so many decades that the United States Air Force has documented cases of grandfathers, fathers, and sons flying the exact same physical aircraft during their careers. But this flying behemoth has a fatal vulnerability. With no stealth and a huge radar signature, the B-52 is not meant to dive into modern contested airspace. Its survival depends on standoff weapons, escorts, jamming, and staying far outside the enemy's strongest air defense envelope. Old metal never really dies, it just waits for a new war. Leave your verdict below.